mother's mind that her baby is alive. No man can know the exact sequence of events that bring the baby to life. But we can speculate. All we can know for sure is that the burst of earth energy leaves the scars of its passing in the hands, and that the energy will follow that exact same pattern throughout all the days of that person's life. Unless the spirit itself decides to change a person's destiny. The Perakee tradition envisions this process as the earth shooting an arrow of life force into baby. If there are no defects, everything built to precise genetic pattern, the arrow will pass through leaving almost no scarring. The initial impact breaks the arrow into two pieces, each following its own path. The path of the energy which upholds our world is shown by the earth line in the hand as it curves southward. The path of the human awareness is shown by the river as it passes straight across the hand. If the fetus is not formed exactly right, according to exact genetic specifications, three things can happen. 1. The process may not work at all, in which case the fetus does not come alive and is aborted by the mother's body. 2. The material may not be dense enough, in which case the damage is so great that the life force cannot be retained effectively by the body. The baby may live for a while, but as it grows it needs more and more energy, which it cannot keep inside the body long enough to use, and the baby slowly starves. This is what happens to most Perakee, they die before the age of 5. 3. If the physical material of the fetus is too dense, then the arrow of life shatters upon impact, the fragments leaving more than the 2 normal scars in passing. Once baby is born, his greatest battle has just begun. There are places where all the strength of body and loving parents are simply not enough. Disease, unclean drinking water, malnourishment, war, pestilence, or something maybe as simple as accident or molestation by a trusted babysitter, any of these things could disrupt the delicate flow of energy within the baby's body. You are right in saying that in a modern country, babies today have a great chance of developing normal healthy bodies. And the teachings were passed from my ancestors at a time when there was no painkiller or sterile hospital facilities. I was the first in my family to ever be born in a hospital. In my childhood, in the 50s and 60s, many babies and mothers died in childbirth. So, yes, these things have to be taken into consideration. But there may be other things too. I am not a geneticist in any shape, form, or fashion, but something about this whole business of connecting Perakee babies with defective genes doesn't sit right with me. I have personally known couples who had 1 or 2 normal, healthy babies, then had a baby with Downs, then had other normal, healthy babies. If it has something to do with the genes of this couple, then why are not all that couple's babies born with defective genes? It is almost as if researchers have accepted it as fact that simian lines are the result of defective genes. I wonder how far out of line I would be if I were to suggest that maybe, just possibly, that is not the case at all. Could it be that the genetic defect is caused by the same energy that caused the simian line itself? Let's go back to what my grandfather said about the energy a Perakee baby carries is sometimes simply too great for his body to contain. Once a baby is born, he is infinitely stronger than when he was just a tiny fetus inside the womb. In the majority of babies, the energy is split when the earth arrow brings them to life. This weakens the energy, thus making it much easier to contain. What happens when the energy does not split but floods the tiny new baby with raw, undiluted power inside the mother? It may just be, however ignorant the suggestion may sound, that the very delicate balance of the genetic structure is sometimes damaged beyond repair. A baby Perakee is known as the first of the Perakee, up to the age of 5. It does not mean that he is the first Perakee, but that this is the first that the world has seen of a particular Perakee. At this age he is compared to pure water from the well. From the age of 5 to 17, he is compared to a mountain stream, bubbling and laughing as it makes its way down the mountainside. From the age of 17 to 29, he is compared to a raging torrent that cuts through the earth, testing its strength against all obstacles, eroding everything in its path to form its own channel. Then after the age of 29, when he has learned to control his impulses and desires, he is known as the last of the Perakee. Again, this does not mean that he is the last Perakee that will ever live. It means that this is the last stage of a particular Perakee's life. He is then compared to a wide, lazy river that is slowly moving to the sea, taking with it all the dregs and sediments of life to be cleansed in the waters from which it came. If the earth arrow is shattered, its 22 separate components may spread willy-nilly across the palm. The two most powerful human components are the intellect and emotions, and they almost always leave the imprint of their passing, even when they separate. But from the moment of their separating to the end of their life, they will struggle for supremacy. The farther their lines are apart, the less they will work together, the more they will fight. The area between them is a battlefield. If they are extremely far apart, they are more like two cowards calling each other names, one afraid to throw the first punch and the other is glad of it. When there are other lines in the hand, such as what hand analysts call the fame line, then that indicates that other fragments of the life force are making their bid for power. They may not win, but they add further confusion into a person's life. When the life forces work together, they make a river that goes completely across the hand. When they are split up, none of them contain the force to make it all the way across. This is interpreted to mean that the energy of the line will lose its power or cease altogether before the person physically dies. He may lose his mind through accident or disease, like Alzheimer's. He may lose the power of his emotions. Most people mellow out with age. Perakee palmistry says that the fewer lines on the hand, the less predictable a person is. 5. The web of desire. According to my grandfather, the word Perakee was synonymous with medicine man, wise one, and man-wolf. These are three distinct classifications. Just having the lines in his hands does not automatically make a child a medicine man. It is only after a lifelong struggle to understand who and what he is, to control the energies he carries, to find the balance and peace within himself that allows wisdom to flow forth. He was held in awe from the moment of his birth. The people of the village understood that, though he be ignorant and stupid now, the time would come when he would lead, and upon him depend the survival of the village. The knowledge the Perakee was given was not secret. My grandfather told me that Toh was surrounded by people of his village at all times. He told my grandfather his stories in front of all who wished to listen, and many did. They were free to use the information any way they saw fit. There is absolutely no difference physically, other than the lines on their hands, between Perakee and Mahakah. You cannot pick them out of the crowd by hair color, eye color, musculature, likes and dislikes, personal history, financial status, habits, or any other trait you can name. Neither is more powerful, nor weaker, nor smarter, nor conscientious. They both receive the same amount and type of energies from the earth. The only difference between the two is that the energies of Mahakah is divided, while the energies of Perakee is not. This makes absolutely no difference to society at large. But, according to the tradition of my ancestors, this makes a great deal of difference in how Perakee and Mahakah perceive the world. And they say that the secret to unlocking this mystery lies in understanding the only line they have in common, the earth line. When the earth arrow was shot into the fetus to bring it to life, it split in two main pieces. In Perakee, the energies that make us human continued westward, forming a powerful river that flows across the palm and off the side into the afterlife and beyond. The most powerful of those energies is the intellect, or sun energies. In Mahakah, the arrow is shattered and leaves many scars. The sun continues to travel westward, but loses its force and flows southward. The emotions, or moon energies, form their own channel in the north. In both Perakee and Mahakah, the part of the arrow that humans do not use in their everyday existence but nevertheless is used to uphold their world, flows south toward the wrist, and the scar it leaves in its passing is called the earth line. 22 energies flow through the river, but many times that number flow through the earth line. No man knows how many it takes to hold our physical world together. My grandfather told me, as an analogy, that humans use only the top 4 feet of the water of the ocean, and that all the water beneath is what flows through the earth line. The main energy of the earth line is called desire. Desire rules not only our world, but the entire earth as well. It is the prime motivating factor behind all that is, ever was, forever will be. The Great Spirit desired humor in its life, and told the earth to make it so. The earth desired to please the Great Spirit, and so created humans. Now the Great Spirit watches the comings and goings of humans, with our deadly seriousness, and laughs its ass off. Desire is what causes us to do anything we do. All our energy is at our beck and call, and we direct it with our desire. If we desire something, we do whatever it takes to acquire it to the extent of the strength of that desire. Unfortunately, most of mankind doesn't know what it desires. Their desire changes from moment to moment. And after getting what they desire, they find they are not satisfied. They find that whatever it was not what they desired after all. Their sun and moon bicker constantly, telling the person to desire more, better, different, faster, slower, prettier, stronger, etc., etc., etc. Their whole life is like being caught in a giant spider web, one huge web of desire. People constantly struggle to free themselves from it until they run out of energy and die. All their energy is wasted on pettiness. Perakee are not free from desire, either. But, in an effort to counterbalance this strong pull, it is explained to them what it is and how it works. Then at least they are free to choose how to direct their energies. When a baby is born, it arrives into a world that is totally alien to him. The only constant is his mother. She was with him while he was in the world of the womb, and she stayed with him throughout his arrival here. She is his only link to his small sense of reality. Her touch, voice, and smell are all that he can even begin to understand. As his senses grow, he begins to feel, hear, taste, smell, and see other things around him. Everything is so strange, he has no idea what they are. But the adults around him help him by telling him what each thing is called. He sees a color, and he is told over and over that that is red, 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 until he finally understands. Each object has to be identified over and over as he learns to judge depth, size, shape, and utility. By the time he is 5 years old, he will have learned to identify literally thousands of things. You and he can discuss any number of objects and agree as to shape, color, texture, size, and usefulness. He has seen these things many times, and he has been told so many times about these things that there is no doubt in his mind what these things are. However, if you were to be able to perceive the world through another person's senses and interpret them with his brain, you would not be able to identify a single object in the world around you. The world would be as alien to you as it is to a newborn child. From this, the young Perakee is taught to feast his eyes upon the beauty, the splendor, the wonder of his world. For it was created just for him the moment he was born, and will cease to exist the moment he dies, never to be repeated again. According to my grandfather, the extent to which a person understands this one simple lesson, that person will be free from the draining influences of the web of desire. I introduced the lines of the hand and told something about them to, at the very least, offer choices. We can either accept the standard orthodox view of the lines as expounded by modern hand analysts, or be aware that there are other views. My world is not black and white. It is filled with all the beauty of the rainbow. I have fought and loved every color under the colorful sun. Teach your children that. Show them love and patience and kindness and mercy, so that when they go out into the world they will know how to treat others. Help them understand that they, too, are part of the beauty, the splendor, the wonder of this magnificent thing we call life. Lead them on a path of discovery that will so engross them that, when desire flows so strongly within them that it threatens to pull them into oblivion, they will be too busy with their own path to succumb to temptations. And their eyes will walk on until they, too, become the last of the Perakee smiley face. 6. Legend of Perakee. The legend of Perakee is a body of stories that tell where the knowledge came from. They have no value in the scientific world of today, other than as myths, and I claim them as nothing more. They are, however, the basis upon which I have lived my life. My grandfather told me that the knowledge of Perakee was first learned by the Toltecs. They were called Toltec devils by the people of the Bo tribe because of how they learned this knowledge. They experimented with babies. They were obsessed with the idea of immortality. They felt that if they could find the specific thing which separated life from inanimate objects, they would be able to control it. Their most heartless experiments involved dissecting babies both before and after the pierce of the earth arrow, in order to see if they could detect the difference. In stories of this obsession with immortality, the stories of Perakee agree with the stories of Carlos Castaneda. In one other aspect do they agree. They both state uncategorically that at least some of the Toltecs were successful in obtaining and using the secret's immortality, and are still alive to this day. Now, in order to answer questions before they arise, I was told these stories before Castaneda even published his first book. If my grandfather was correct in asserting that all Native Americans today are descendants of the Toltecs, then I am sure that eventually other stories about them will surface. Almost all tribes have their own stories of those who have gone before. The Caddo call them Kadoha, the Navajo call them Anunnaki, etc. There are ancient ruins all over the Americas which must conclude that an advanced race of people lived here at one time. And many stories about them are still around today. The stories handed down by the Bow tribe show that the people of small villages had very little actual contact with the Toltecs. Toltecs were usually seen walking about the prairies and deserts. They wore robes that covered their heads, and seldom did anyone get a look at them up close. In the forests of Arkansas, Toltecs were never seen unless they wished it to be so. The normal day-to-day activities of the villagers caused them to be in the woods constantly, and no Toltecs were ever reported as being seen. However, someone would look around and suddenly notice one of them standing in the middle of the village. The villagers would surround them in awe, wondering how they could have gotten into the village unseen. Many stories arose about them being shape changers because sometimes an unusual animal would be spotted just before the Toltec made an appearance, like a wolf or large bat. When a Toltec was encountered, he would hold up his right hand, palm forward, and everyone could plainly see that they were all Perakee. Almost every time one would appear, it was in the 5th summer that a Perakee baby was born into the tribe. The Toltec would appear, take the baby and leave. No one ever knew how they knew about the babies being in the village, or when they would be 5 years old. The villagers looked at the Toltecs as magical beings, and honored them accordingly. As the Toltec Empire collapsed, the villagers heard stories of great battles between different groups of Toltecs. They had no idea what the fighting was about, and, since it did not concern them, could have cared less. Then one day 22 Toltecs showed up in their village all at once. Since they had never seen or heard of more than 2 Toltecs being seen at the same time, the villagers were very frightened. There was much crying and screaming, and some of them ran away, because they thought the Toltecs were there to kill them for some reason. But the Toltecs only raised their hands and smiled. They scattered among the villagers and mingled with them. They were especially cordial to the children, though none of the children were Perakee at that time. The Toltecs opened their robes and took out various objects and distributed them around as gifts, and enough food to feed the whole village. The gifts and food were strange to the villagers. After everyone had eaten and began to calm down and accept the strangers among them, the Toltecs removed their hoods from their heads. Again there was much screaming and crying, and again some ran away from the sight before them. No one had ever seen a Toltec's head before, and now it was seen that they were barely recognizable as human. Their foreheads bulged out like a balloon. It was as if a strip of rawhide had been tied tightly from beneath their chins around the top of their heads at birth, which caused their heads to be deformed as they grew. And their eyes were very shiny as they peered out from the shadows of their foreheads. Again it took a while for the people to calm down. The Toltecs smiled and helped with chores, and told great stories. Some were silly and amused the children. Some were about things the villagers could not understand. After a week, the leader of the Toltecs, named Tolo, began to tell why they had come. "We have come on a mission of great importance to the world, a mission of mercy," he said. "We have known of the people of the Bow for a very long time. We have watched you, and in ways that you cannot understand, we have protected you. We know that you are an honorable people, that when you give your word, you never break it. So we have come to you to ask a favor. If you say no, we will understand. But it is to all of our great advantage if you will do this thing for us. We are the last of the Toltecs, the empire is no more. All the knowledge of our race is in our heads. That is why our heads are formed the way they are. If we die, then all our knowledge is gone forever. But we have found a way to preserve it, if you will help us. And in return, we will give all this knowledge to you." The Bow villagers argued for days about this, some for and many against helping the Toltec devils. Finally they agreed to the Toltecs' request. "Thank you," Tolo told them. "Now, each one of us will die, one a day for 22 days. The others will bury the dead in the exact spot where their body lies. I will be the last to die, so you will have to bury me exactly as I request. A seed will be planted on each grave. Next spring, 22 trees will grow, and in those trees will all our knowledge be contained. Then all you will have to do is talk to the trees and they impart the knowledge. We do not know how to talk to trees, the villagers cried. What you say is nonsense. How do we learn to talk to trees? And Tolo replied, the trees will teach you how to talk to them, in return for your kindness in taking care of them. Bewildered, some of the villagers asked, why do you do this? Why do you do it here in our land? Tolo explained, the water from the spring in your village flows into a creek that flows to the river, now known as the Little Missouri River. Not far from here is a place where the water changes colors on the middle night of the full moon. You call it the creek where the water runs red. The villagers nodded their heads in agreement that they knew of this place. We discovered in that place long ago a treasure that is more valuable than all the wealth of man. We call it the well. It is the place where all life force comes out of the earth and flows all over the everywhere. It is this energy that makes life. It is used by all plants, insects, animals, and man to live. It was discovered by accident, and we had to hide it again or people would have come here and destroyed it with their greed. They would have built a city here, and temples, and all sorts of buildings. They would have moved here and lived with their pettiness and warped emotions. The energy coming out of the earth would have passed through all the human garbage, and it would have been tainted. Life as we know it would have come to an end. So we hid it the only way we knew how. Everyone who knew of this place was killed. Thousands of people were sacrificed, their throats cut, their blood running into the creek and turning it red. The earth still has the memory, and that is why it turns red on the full moon. For the next 22 days a Toltec laid down and died and was buried and a tree planted on his grave. The villagers buried Tolo, then they tended to the graves as they were asked. The next spring 22 trees began to grow. The Bow village tended those trees for 5 generations, over 100 years. They grew taller than all other trees in the area. The whole village could stand under one of them. Then one night a storm blew them all down. When the villagers went to look at the trees the next morning, they felt lost and afraid. Their mission in life was gone. And they thought the old Toltecs would rise out of the ground and slay them for allowing the trees to die. But suddenly the sky turned a strange color. They looked up and saw the biggest rainbow they had ever seen. It covered the entire sky, and appeared so low that you could have thrown a rock and hit it. So clearly could they see it, they not only saw the 7 normal colors of a rainbow, but all the myriad colors in between. They counted 21 distinct colors. With white on the top and black on the bottom, they recognized 23 individual shades. And as rainbows had long been seen as good omens, the villagers knew that the Toltecs were telling them that all was okay. Shortly afterward, a Perakee baby was born into the tribe, the first one since the ancient Toltecs were buried. Then another, and then another. 22 Perakee babies were born into the tribe within the year after the trees blew down. The villagers were ecstatic but confused. No one knew how to raise a Perakee baby. Always before, at least according to the old stories, the Toltecs came and took Perakee babies away when they were 5 years old. So, what did this mean? They had no idea. So they raised the babies as they would normal Mahakah babies. All went well until the babies were 5 years old. When the babies were old enough to talk among themselves, they found that what the Mahakah adults were telling them about the world around them was not what they were seeing. Always before, a Perakee baby had no point of reference, no other Perakee around to discuss or reinforce what he was seeing and feeling. Now, however, there were. And soon the babies were teaching the adults. And from this it became clear why Toltecs collected Perakee babies. As the Perakee grew, word of their vast knowledge was passed from village to village. Soon other villages were bringing their Perakee babies to the Bow tribe to be raised. The parents, and sometimes the whole village, came along too and were welcomed. For the first time, at least in the Bow village, Perakee babies were being taught by older Perakee. As the Perakee reached the age of 17, they began to leave home to find other villages to aid with their knowledge. One stayed behind to raise more Perakee babies, and to lead the tribe. As the Perakee came across others born with the mark of Perakee in their hands, they taught them all they knew, and then moved on. If the young Perakee were successful in balancing their energies, after the age of 29, they would hear a distant voice calling their name. And many found their way to this area. For thousands of years Perakee from all over the Americas made the pilgrimage to read the stones and ancient bones where angels fear to tread. From that day to this, the area around where the Bo tribe lived is known as the Land of the Talking Wood. Within this area is the graveyard of the ancient Toltecs, alongside the creek where the water runs red. Now you know as much about the origins of Perakee as I do. Cry of the Ancient Warriors. I came and watched the man-wolves dance a long time ago. They called to me from beneath my feet, but I just couldn't go. I knelt beneath a cooling stream, I felt the sinking sand. I reached to grab the sacred gold, but there was nothing in my hand. I heard the screams of the terrified who couldn't pass the test. Slain by the watchers on the hill, guardians of the quest. I found the tomb of Tolo, he bid me come and see. The lust for life in his yellow eyes was a trail of tears for me. The doors that beckoned in my life have brought me to this place. Here I stand, an unworthy fool bound by the hands of fate. Now it's my turn to make my bid, the arrows point straight at me. Calm the beast inside my breast if I'm ever to be free. The ancient warriors called me back. To step inside the gate. And if I turn and walk away, we both know it will be too damned late. 7. Balancing the level. In my last post, I outlined the legend of Perakee, which details how 22 Perakee babies were born into the Bo tribe at the same time. As they matured, they found that what the Mahakah adults were telling them about the world was not what they were seeing. From discussing this problem among themselves, they were able to reinforce descriptions of what they were sensing. All the knowledge of Perakee stems from that period. So from here on, I will preface what I say with the Perakee, referring to the original 22 Perakee. I think this will be less redundant, easier to type, and easier to follow than prefacing everything with my grandfather told me that his grandfather told him. I hope that makes sense. The Perakee perceived the life force as being like water. Water is held in vast reservoirs within the earth, and rises to the surface in springs, or wells. Each type of life, whether plant, insect, bird, animal, fish or human, has an overall well. Each tribe or species has its own smaller well. Each baby, whether plant or animal, receives its own water at the moment of the pierce of the earth arrow when it comes to life. The water is held in a vessel, or cup provided by the earth. Not all cups are the same size, so each draws its own amount. Not all cups are made perfect. But each individual is forced to make do with whatever he is given. And each individual is different because of where he draws his water from within the well, middle, sides, top, or bottom. As water is drank from the cup, it is automatically refilled from the well. The Perakee perceived this water from the well as almost pure. Though most of the impurities have been removed from it through the earth's natural cleansing process, there are still bits of alien matter. This foreign substance was perceived as being yellow in color, and could be called instinct, racial memory, or intuition left over from when other lives used it. The water is never wasted, but used over and over. As each individual gets done with it, it is poured back into the well, adding what he learned to the reservoir. So each generation is a little bit wiser, or dumber, than the one before. In this way, life is ever moving forward, for better or worse. Each individual is responsible for his own cup. If he takes care of it, he will always have plenty to drink. If he lets it get dirty, his life will be filled with disease, at least until he learns to clean it. If he abuses it, it will become chipped and cracked, and will not hold as much water, so his life force slowly gets less and less. Sometimes a cup is destroyed through accident or acts of violence. The cup naturally deteriorates with age, holding less and less water, until it can hold no more, and the individual dies. The Perakee perceived that there are 4 stages in the life of a Perakee, but only 3 stages in the life of Mahakah. The first stage is from birth to the age of 5, and is the same for both Perakee and Mahakah. The child has only to live, to grow and learn how to use his energies. He is mostly guided by instinct, or what the Perakee perceived as the yellow energies, during this stage. He must be protected and nurtured. And as he learns to perceive color, size, shape, sound, taste, smell, and feeling, names are given to the baby for each of them so he will be able to communicate what he senses as he lives his life. If he lives to the age of 5, he has passed his first great test of life. He has learned to contain his energies. At the age of 5, the differences between Perakee and Mahakah began to show, though not readily apparent at first. During this stage, the person's other two great groups of energy begin to take over his life. The emotion group, perceived as the red, or moon, energies is one group. The reason group, perceived as blue, or sun, energies is the other. During the first stage before the age of 5, the emotions and reason are present, but almost completely subdued by instinct. A baby is perceived as yellow, mottled periodically with red and blue. But since he has not learned how to handle the emotions or intellect yet, he is certainly not using them in a deliberate fashion, and it is the great mistake of parents to believe that a baby can. For an adult to punish a child of less than 5 years old, at least in the eyes of Perakee, is a crime against nature. There is a vast difference between discipline and punishment. Discipline involves patience, love, understanding, and instruction. Punishment involves anger, yelling, implied disappointment, negative reinforcement, and pain. If parents had their mouths washed out with soap and were sent to bed without supper, the world would probably be a better place. During the second stage of a person's life, he is taught how to understand, use, and direct his sun and moon energies. The proper use of emotion and intellect is very clear. The moon tells us what we need or want, and the sun figures out how to make it so. The emotion of pain tells us we need to go to the bathroom. The intellect tells us how to go about emptying our bladder and bowels, hopefully in a socially acceptable manner. A great part of the child's teaching during the second stage, from the age of 5 to the age of 17, is helping him to understand how to meet his needs within the framework of his society. He is taught not to steal, lie, cheat, kill, or destroy wantonly, and all the other things that a person must learn to live in harmony with others. He is especially taught how to control his moon energies. Without constraints, the emotions will destroy not only the individual, but all he comes into contact with. In Mahakah, the emotions and intellect are kept apart, and rightly so. This creates a balancing of forces within the individual. If one threatens to take over completely, then the other steps in and, hopefully, talks some sense into the errant energy. Everything is okay as long as neither energy takes total control. It is as if there were two great armies in the world. As long as there is a check and balance, neither army can take over total control of the earth. Each is always aware of the other, and no move can be made without awareness that that move will be countered by the other army. In this way, the people of Earth are protected from total enslavement to one system or another. But sometimes there is total enslavement of the intellect by the emotion. The Perakee call this the full moon rising. It is a time of great danger for the individual, and for all he comes into contact with. The moon has no reasoning ability of its own, and will carry everything in its path, including itself, into total annihilation and never bat an eye, if it is left unchecked. The Perakee perceived that Mahakah were given a great gift of compassion from the earth by separating the moon and the sun. When one system fails, they simply fall back on the other. This configuration gives Mahakah an ability to survive in the most inclement conditions. Perakee, those born with Simian lines, are a different matter altogether. Their sun and moon energies, intellect and emotion, are not separated by a natural process. Therefore, they must learn to control their energies by an act of will. The Perakee perceived this to be a great trust of the earth, rather than a gift. They must learn to balance the level of intensity between sun and moon on their own. The Perakee began teaching children about these things beginning at the age of 5. They did not worry so much about Mahakah children, knowing that most of them, like cockroaches, would manage to survive. Most of the teaching was directed toward Perakee children because knowledge is the only tool they have in their struggle to balance their energies. They saw this as not only a great gift but a great curse. If Perakee do not learn this art of balancing their sun and moon, they will live their life in total chaos, being pulled constantly between emotion and intellect, never understanding what is causing it. Their life will be one long series of mishaps, broken relationships, startings without completions, and general dissatisfaction and uneasiness. At the age of 17, the instincts again take over and humans enter their third stage of life. Like a bird feeling the powerful drive to leave the nest and fly on its own, children go into the world to experience life without their parents and teachers to guide them. This is the second most critical stage for Perakee. They have exactly 12 years to prove to the world at large that they can indeed control their energies in an acceptable fashion. During this period, young adults are given some leeway in the performance of their tasks, though certainly not as much as when they were children. The difference is now society administers discipline, instead of parents. Mahakah remain in this stage throughout the remainder of their lives. They grow older, and maybe a little wiser, but they hobble on wobbly legs of emotion and intellect until they grow too feeble to navigate the world. Then they sit in the rocking chairs on the front porch of their lives and watch the world go by until they die. Most ponder, hope, and dream of an afterlife, but their cups are too worn to retain water, and they simply lack the energy to enter the afterlife in full consciousness. Their water is poured back into the well, to be cleansed and held in reserve until other babies are born to reuse that same water. The Perakee, however, perceive that those born with Simian lines have other work to do. By the time they are 29 years old, they should be able to control their emotion energies, and get on with the task they agreed to perform before they were born. No one can tell you what that task is. Only you and the spirit were there when the agreement was made. The Perakee called this task that we are born to perform balancing the level. They saw that as entities use and reuse the water from the well, it becomes filled with impurities. The earth does much to help filter these out, but it expects us to help maintain the wells, just like we are expected to maintain our own cups. If the water gets too polluted, it becomes unfit for consumption, and those who drink from the well die out. The Perakee perceived that the way Perakee purify the waters of life is in two stages. First, as he brings his own energies under control, he acts as a great balancing influence on the people around him. From this came a line in a poem I quoted in one of my earlier postings: "Power carried, and where he tarries, peace spreads across the land." Excerpt from Water from the Well. Down by the creek where the water runs red, surrounded by the stones of the ancient dead, I drew a cup of water from the human well. The wise man knows what the wise men tell. A full moon rises down the corridor, and the scarlet woman says, "There will be war. So when I die and go to hell, just throw my cup of water back into the well." 8. Sleeping with the enemy. The original Perakee saw that there are 4 stages in the life of Perakee: from birth to the age of 5, from 5 to 17, from 17 to the age of 29, and then the final stage, called the last of the Perakee. They perceived that the 3rd stage is a great battle that is fought within themselves that lasts for 12 years. The principal combatants are the sun and moon energies, what we would call reason and emotion. Both sides are evenly matched, having 7 energies each, and no one can tell ahead of time which will win. Both are fighting for control of the individual. The entire rest of the person's life hinges on the outcome of this fight. If the emotions win, then hope is lost for that individual, at least as far as personal choices are concerned. He will live the rest of his life in a type of purgatory that he cannot escape from. He might become a drunk, or get involved with drugs, or live a life of debauchery. He might become a hermit because he finds it extremely difficult to get along with others. Because of his violent and unpredictable nature, he might even rise to the leadership of a gang or criminal group. Whatever direction his life takes him, he will be seen as an outcast by society. If he is viewed as a threat, he may be imprisoned. If his actions don't get him crossways with the law, he may out his life in quiet anonymity. If intellect wins, then all hope is lost for that individual, at least as far as personal choices are concerned. He will be seen as cold, uncaring, incapable of normal human relationships. He will perhaps be viewed as a benign obsessive-compulsive, no action taken without a reason, everything in its place, extremely rigid in word and deed. There will be no beauty, wonder, or joy in his life. Whether at the North Pole or in downtown Tokyo, he will always be alone, a machine going about the tactical rudiments of biological functioning. These individuals were called Black Perakee, and were known as Watchers. Black was the color assigned to the earth energies. Just because a person fails to bring his energies under control of the will does not negate obligations in place when the person was born. The spirit continues to move through the individual, destiny will be fulfilled, even if he has to be dragged kicking and screaming through the motions. And his only recourse is to sit quietly by and watch as the drama unfolds around him. But this is no great mystery. Society doesn't care if you buy a horse. But you will be held accountable for that horse's actions. If he tears through a fence and eats your neighbor's vegetable garden, you will have to pay for the damage. If you buy a car, you will be expected to demonstrate that you can control it in a safe, acceptable manner. If you run other motorists off the road, or drive through people's houses at high rates of speed, or drive over people who are walking on the sidewalk, you will be banned from driving. You will then be totally dependent on others for your traveling needs, either public conveyances or the whims of friends and family. This is the exact same thing. You are expected to control your own energies. If you cannot, then society will do it for you. And you will probably not like how they go about it. On the other hand, you pass the test at age 29 simply by proving that you can control your energies, no different than owning a horse or car. It is that simple. Then the world will welcome you with open arms. They will say, "Good for you. You are one of us now." A little weird, perhaps. Nonetheless, you may come and go as you please. How a Perakee goes through this process to draw a satisfactory conclusion is totally up to the individual. As Larry R. pointed out, it is an extremely difficult process. There are no support systems in place to help us. Geneticists and psychologists and priests and maybe even hand analysts may be trying to help, but their results so far are dubious, at best. It is fairly obvious that they have no idea of who and what we are. But blind leaders of the blind have always been in vogue, and are especially in high demand today. The Perakee called this balancing of the energies sleeping with the enemy. Mahakah go through this balancing process too, but since the forces are separated, it is like two distinct villages of people learning to get along. In Perakee, the once warring parties must live in the same house. And though they have called a truce, each understands that if the other is pushed past its limits, all hell will break loose again. It may be the dream of hand analysts to be able to someday say, "Ah, you have a simian hand. That means that you are this and this and this." It's really simple, don't you see? But if they try to put us all in the same box, they may never realize their dream. The Perakee said that there are 22 distinct types of Perakee, as opposed to 98 types of Mahakah, that only become operational at the age of 29. When the earth arrow pierced us to bring us to life, the arrow broke into pieces. In Perakee, the second piece stayed intact, and left a scar all the way across the palm. In this scar, what is called the river, are 22 energies coexisting side by side. As long as the sun and moon were fighting, the person never had a chance to feel the other energies. They have been there all along, but the war got all the airplay, so to speak. After the war is over, peace reigns in the life of the individual, and he begins to notice little things that he never really looked at before. The Perakee perceived that as we reach the age of 29, we reach a fork in the road. The left-hand path is the way of the black Perakee. The right-hand path is further divided into 4 directions. These are the paths of the red Perakee, blue Perakee, and yellow Perakee, and a little tiny path called the way of the white Perakee, used only once every 1,000 years. The 4 right-hand paths of the last of the Perakee are named by the colors of the groups of energy that make us human. The red path is the way of the moon, and those who walk it are called manwolves, or guardians. The blue path is the way of the sun, called the teacher's path, and its followers are called wise ones. The yellow path is the way of the priest, or medicine man, and his work is with the 7 energies of intuition, or racial memory, and the symbol of this path is the star. I don't know much about the white Perakee. My grandfather spoke of him in very mysterious tones, as if the one that walks that path is something more than human. White is the color assigned by the Perakee for the life force itself. The white Perakee is the most ferocious being of all. He wields all the 22 energies as if they are one. His job is to bring balance, to undo all the damage that has been done in the previous 50 generations. He is feared and hated. He brings light into the world. And, just as rats scurry when the light is turned on, men know they have been caught and are about to be brought to justice. 9. The Perakee Way. I have noticed that many who read these posts have a primary language other than English. My hat certainly goes off to those folks. It must be extremely difficult to follow our musings in a tongue alien to their own. For English, as I rather imagine other languages do too, has many subtleties, fine-drawn distinctions of irony, humor, sarcasm, wit, bitterness, and joy. But what else can you expect from a form of communication that utilizes a predetermined series of squeaks and grunts, and is recorded by stylized scratchings?
We'll get through it, y'all.
And many of our words have different meanings. Take the word grandfather, for instance. My dictionary gives 3 different meanings for that word. 1. A parental father. 2. A forefather, ancestor. 3. Pre-existing condition, as in grandfather clause. I would add another definition to that list. 4. A personification of racial memory or ancestral knowledge. I am attempting to record here, for the purposes of posterity, stories that were given to me by my grandfather that were developed by people with simian lines as a didactic device to help others with simian lines understand who and what they are. Folks with simian lines are called Perakee, and those with heart lines are called Mahakah. These stories are Toltec in origin, and were passed from Perakee to Perakee by the Bo tribe of the Caddo. The Perakee perceived that there are 4 stages in the life of Perakee. The 3rd stage, from ages 17 to 29, is spoken of as a great battle that rages in the hearts and minds of all men. All religions and philosophies tell of this great battle, in many and varied ways. Only the most astute of Mahakahs see this battle as a personal process. Most see it as something that only peripherally concerns them. But the battle inside Mahakah is never really quite drawn to a final conclusion. The result of all war is not necessarily the total annihilation of the enemy, but the destruction of that enemy's capability to strike back. And since neither side is strong enough in Mahakah to kill the other, the battle goes on and on and on. The battle inside Perakee, on the other hand, is drawn to a final conclusion, around the age of 29. If left to their own devices, one energy or the other will in fact kill the other, or dominate it so completely that it is never an effective force in the life of that individual again. Once the battle is over, the yellow energies will rise, alright, only to be dominated in turn by the winner of the battle. In effect, the winner, whether red or blue, will be a dictator, a tyrant. And the individual loses all freedom of choice. The only worthwhile conclusion is for neither red nor blue energies to win, but for the individual to bring the fighting energies under control of will. And there is no one on God's green earth that can tell you how to win this fight. There have been many who have won, and their stories are shining examples that it can be done, like stories in the Bible and other holy works of all times and lands. But every story is different. No 2 people won their fight just alike. The Perakee felt that knowledge is the only tool we have to help win this struggle. The younger a person is when he begins learning about who and what he is, what the energies are, how they work, what the fight is all about, the higher his chances of success. Without knowledge, the chances of success are actually very low. It breaks down approximately 100 Perakee born. 50 die before the age of 5. 25 die between the ages of 5 and 29. 12 or 13 become black Perakee. 6 become red Perakee. 3 become blue Perakee. 1 or 2 become yellow Perakee. However, knowledge changes all these numbers. The gaining of knowledge of who and what we are, of how to deal with the struggle within ourselves, how to comprehend a world of our own perceptions, is the great opportunity that Larry R. has given us. What we learn here over the next year or 20 years may change the way simians are looked at, and the way we look at each other. We either do it ourselves, or the world will write on our tombstone, "It wasn't his fault. He was a genetic defect. The poor bastard never had a chance." 10. The boss energy. The original 22 Perakee, that I told of in the legend of Perakee, perceived that the lines in the hands have no power of their own. They are simply scars left over from when they were pierced with the earth arrow, that moment when they were brought to life inside the mother's womb, changing them from inanimate object to organic life form. The scars in the hand show how the earth energies were dispersed through their bodies. The energies were grouped in various ways, and those groupings never change throughout a person's life. Therefore, we can understand ourselves better, why we do things the way we do them, what causes our basic personality, how we perceive our world, by studying the lines in the hand. The lines on the hand, euphemistically speaking, are channels for the 22 energies that make us human. In Perakee, all the energies flow through the river, or river of life, the line that hand analysts call the headline. One of those energies is the life force itself, and the Perakee gave it the color white. It imbues all the energies with life. Therefore it cannot be called a separate energy. Which leaves 21 energies that make us who we are. In Mahakah, not all 21 energies flow through the river. The energies have been separated. 7 of those energies, called the emotions, or red energies, live in a separate channel called the line of death. These energies have no life force of their own, except indirectly, and are therefore also called the moon energies. There are 7 energies that live in the river that we would call the reason. The Perakee called these the blue energies, or sun energies, because they have so much life force that they shine. Darkness cannot prevail where reason walks. There are 7 other energies that live in the river called the yellow energies, which are the intuitions, or racial memories, or instincts. Though these yellow energies are an active part of all our lives, they are seldom perceived while the other energies are fighting. I went into some small detail about this fight, which occurs from the ages of 17 to around 29, in earlier posts. Each line on the hand has an energy that is dominant within that grouping. The dominant energy varies from person to person. In Mahakah, any one of the 7 energies in the line of death can rise up to lead the other 6. And of the 14 energies in their river, one will naturally be the leader of those energies. The 2 boss energies join together to make the basic personality of each Mahakah. Therefore, there are 98 basic types of Mahakah. There are sometimes other lines in the hand, with 1 or more energies grouped there, and of course that grouping will have a leader also. But instead of helping, this 3rd, and sometimes 4th and 5th boss only adds confusion into the life of the individual. It is hard enough to try to please 2 bosses, much less 3, 4, or 5. A wise man once said, "You cannot have 2 masters. You will love one and hate the other, or respect one and despise the other." In Perakee, only 1 energy will be dominant in the life of the individual. Only one can be dominant at any one time. Therefore, there are 22 basic types of Perakee. For once every 1,000 years a person will be born in whom the life force itself is the boss energy. In Black Perakee, either the red or blue energies won the fight, and subjugate all the other energies. This is not necessarily good or bad, but it is perceived as a less than admirable conclusion, because the individual loses a certain amount of personal choice. All the energies will rise once the fighting stops, but the person's entire life will be geared toward either emotional or rational pursuits. Once the fighting stops, around the age of 29, if neither group has totally dominated the individual, then all 22 energies will have an equal voice. You will have a chance to get to know them, what they are, what they have to offer, their function. Each one has a completely different personality. Some you will like and enjoy their friendship. Some you may not really care for. But just like a company that has 22 employees, who all must work together to turn out the company's products, you allow all the energies to do their part. Because of your nature and bent, one of those energies will become your best friend. You will do everything together. You will share each other's deepest, darkest secrets. You will become an expert of that energy. And, depending on the color of that energy, you will become red, blue, or yellow Perakee. 11. Medicine Man. In the posting entitled Balancing the Level, I explained how the original Perakee perceived the life energies that flow through humans, and that they perceived the task of all Perakee is to help maintain the wells from which life force flows. And I told that that task is performed in 2 ways. Since then, I have explained the first way that this is done, by simply balancing your energies so that you yourself become a balancing influence in a chaotic world. You don't have to do anything. Most times, just being in a given situation will prevent the full moon from rising in the hearts of those around you.